Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a book that absolutely took the world by storm. It's a story of survival, of isolation, and yeah, a story of mystery. But the most shocking story of all, it might not be the one you read on the page. I mean, for a while there, it really felt like you couldn't go anywhere without seeing someone reading Where the Crawdads Sing. Delia Owens' debut novel wasn't just a book. No way. This thing was a full-blown cultural event, just parked at the top of the bestseller list for months on end. And just to give you a sense of the scale we're talking about, by the end of 2019 alone, it had sold more than 4 million copies. It was a true publishing juggernaut that, honestly, nobody saw coming. And the praise? It was pretty much universal. Critics, readers, everyone was just captivated, falling in love with what one review called the gorgeous lyrical prose that really brought the setting, the marsh, to life. So what was the secret sauce? What made this book connect with so many people? Well, to really get that, you have to step into the world of its main character. The story introduces us to Kaya Clark, and her story is just heartbreaking. She's abandoned by her entire family as a child, left to fend for herself completely alone in the wild marshes. The local townspeople, they're wary of her. They call her the Marsh Girl. And this right here is the absolute key to understanding who she is. Because she's been shunned by people, Kia turns to the natural world. The marsh becomes her parent. The animals become her teachers. She learns the rules of survival, not from society, but directly from the wild. This brings us to the core theme of the whole novel, this clash between two different kinds of law. You've got the laws of society, our moral codes, and then you have what the book calls natural law, this older, more primal instinct where survival is literally the only thing that matters. And this perspective really shapes everything in the story, especially the murder mystery at its heart. When a local guy, Chase Andrews, is found dead, the book kind of asks us to see it not as a human tragedy, not as a sin, but through the cold, unsentimental eyes of the swamp itself. And this is where the story takes a massive turn, a jump from the page into a deeply disturbing reality. Because these themes in the book, murder, natural law, they have this uncanny echo of a real-life controversy that involves the author herself. So get this. Years before she ever wrote this blockbuster novel, Delia Owens and her husband at the time, Mark, were wildlife conservationists in Africa. And in 1995, they found themselves right in the middle of a homicide investigation in Zambia after the on-camera killing of a man they suspected was a poacher. So their conservation work starts back in the 70s. By the mid-80s, they're in Zambia running these really intense anti-poaching patrols. And then, in 1995, an ABC film crew that's with them actually captures a fatal shooting during one of these patrols. The footage that eventually aired on the documentary Turning Point, it was shocking. It showed a man who was already down, already wounded, being shot again, fatally. It was an execution-style killing. The victim was never identified. And the person who fired those final shots off camera was never identified either. You can imagine that broadcast kicked off an official investigation in Zambia. And here's the crucial part. To this day, that case is still open. Zambian authorities have confirmed that Delia Owens, her then-husband Mark, and his son Christopher are all still wanted for questioning about that killing. So, with that context in mind, let's go back to the novel. Because suddenly, that whole philosophy that Kaya, the marsh girl, lives by, it starts to feel pretty unnerving. In the book, Kaya is always watching the brutal, survivalist behavior of animals. She sees a female praying mantis kill its mate, and she applies those lessons to her own life. It becomes a way for her to justify harsh, even violent actions by saying, hey, that's just the law of nature. Chillingly, that exact same logic shows up in that ABC documentary. After the shooting, the killing of the alleged poacher isn't framed as a human tragedy. It's framed as a kind of ecological necessity, a part of the natural order. It's a viewpoint that puts conservation above conventional morality. And according to people who knew the Owens family in Zambia, this wasn't just some narrative choice for a documentary. A local conservationist described their view world as basically seeing the African population as an obstacle to their work of saving animals. And critics of the novel argue that you can see echoes of that attitude in the book itself. They point to how Black characters are depicted, citing harmful stereotypes, outdated language, and how the story is set in the Jim Crow South but kind of just ignores the brutal reality of segregation. So when you put all of these pieces together, it just forces you to look at this incredibly popular book in a completely different light, and it raises some profoundly uncomfortable questions. And this isn't just us making connections. The author herself has explicitly said it. She said in interviews, quote, "My experiences created Kaya." She is drawing a direct line between her own life of isolation in the wild and the worldview of her main character. And all of this leads to the novel's final shocking twist. We learn that Kaya did kill Chase Andrews. She got away with it, and the story frames her actions as a necessary act of survival, a perfect example of that natural law she lived by. The parallel is just impossible to ignore. And this detail is just fascinating. Kaya's confession isn't spoken out loud. It's hidden in her art. It's in a poem that's found after she dies. Her art tells the truth that she could never say. And it just makes you ask the question, is Delia Owens' own art, her own fiction, also a kind of confession? Ultimately, it leaves us with one of the oldest and most difficult questions there is. Can you separate the art from the artist? When you learn the troubling story behind the story, does it change the art itself? For millions of readers, Where the Crawdads Sing was a beautiful escape, but now it's also become a mirror, reflecting a very complex and a very unresolved real-life mystery.